what would the universe look like if you could look at it? And the answer is a human being. And I always love that thought because it's like when you bring two human beings together creatively, it's like you're bringing two universes together and they're trying to find a relationship. And if you let only one person dictate everything and the other, you lose out on an entire universe. This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Exploring the challenges of the creative call
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
We're back at it, Evan. Another episode. This one's called Creative Control. And I'm actually surprised we've never done this episode before. I'm very surprised. Creative control is such a big concept in art. And it was interesting because I was telling Evan a little bit about something that I've been chewing on recently about the idea as an artist. It's like sometimes I think we just kind of take what we can get because we just want to create and maybe our values aren't aligned with it, but it's like we're just happy to work. And this is so true for like actors. And I feel this is true as a filmmaker and a screenwriter at least. And I can imagine it's similar as a musician or anybody who's hired to do art, where you're just like, oh, I just feel lucky to get paid to do this or get the opportunity to do something. But immediately Evan raised a counterpoint. And I thought it was a really good thing. It was like, because my point was, well, if you could choose to do whatever you wanted, what would you do? And although that sounds good in theory, there's also this other idea, which is that sometimes it's good to not control what you do. Sometimes it's good to be open and to do something or have the opportunity to do something you wouldn't think to do. And so we kind of thought, well, what are we talking about here? And creative control just seemed like the natural title. Creative control is good in some ways, but maybe in some ways it works against you. And I think we're probably going to get into this conversation and maybe we can kind of navigate it. And where should we step up and take creative control? And where should we let go of it because it's actually mucking things up and we're getting too in our own way? So I'm excited to see where this goes. I mean, I don't even know, but it is something that I've been chewing on. And this conversation is a real gift for me because it's going to just help me further this thought. And I'm so glad you brought in that counterpoint to this thing that I was kind of going in one direction with. And it really just stopped me in my tracks and got me to think about it.
Well, I'm always happy to do that. And you started it, that's part of the whole thing is with even something like this podcast, you come in and you have something to share that not necessarily that what you're bringing up is not something I haven't at least heard some form of that before, but there's that give and take, that relationship that is so, it always gives us a place of reference and even with sort of where I lay with my approach to acting and in teaching Meisner is my teacher used to say, your partner will take you farther than you ever dreamed of, right? Like part of speaking to a little bit of what my point was and part of this conversation is that like, yeah, if you get too caught up in your own ideas of things, you can easily miss stuff, right? Which is why you get somebody else to proofread your shit or just, you actively having a certain part of your process in which you have trusted people. And you see that especially within collaborative mediums like film, right? Where people continue to work with certain types of people. I've always worked with this director and this DOP and this composer and whatever. Like they're a unit and they kind of just always, whenever they can, pair up because there's a level of understanding, respect, of input and where they work well together. And there's, because there's also those directors, I won't name any names, but like there's directors who have basically been given complete like basically complete creative control over things, and it's been an absolute disaster, right? At the same time, there's ones who have been given that, and they do incredible work too, right? Like your Nolans and your Finchers and stuff like that. Not perfect, but they're like, they've kind of earned a certain, you've shown that you can handle that. You can be trusted with that level of control. But even then, I'm sure if you dive into it to a certain degree, you'll see that they are still creating lots of space for things to happen, to surprise them, right? Because I think that that's a big part of that doesn't get talked about with artists a lot, is that being surprised is such an awesome thing. It's part of the joy of the process is all of the surprises that come up. And one thing that I was thinking about, just sort of, I guess, for opening remarks too, is a great sort of way in which you can sometimes see how that process and that collaboration works, is there's that, I don't know if they're like a YouTube channel. I used to always see their stuff come up on like Facebook, but there's is it called like script to screen or something like that? It's some sort of whoever puts it together, they will show the scene playing from like a really great or famous movie. And as the scene is going, you can see the script.
Oh, yes.
Like sort of scrolling underneath it. What's that? Script rant?
No, I don't know.
I don't know. I can't. I wish I could remember. Somebody out there is just like, this is what it is.
Yeah.
But I find it so fascinating because they often take like really great scripts and that were made by really great directors, and sometimes it's a writer-director situation too. And you see what was on the page and then what ended up on the screen. And you'll see that there's these deviations. There's these things that were, the writer had the idea in their head of this is how it's going to go. But then when it comes time for it, it's like, oh, it's not exactly how it went. Like the direction was for the actor to shout this line, but they didn't. They actually they whispered this line. And, that's part of how these things happen. And it's like, wow, can you imagine that, that performance being different? And there's, that's kind of some of the, just a small example of where that interplay and that relationship between, the people who have sort of the most power and control and with other key members of this process, right? And that it's like, it's not all about just you having it exactly the way that you have it in your head all the time. I mean, some people are like that. Very often people are like, I'm never working with that person ever again, because it sucks some of the joy out of it, right? But there are some people who they do such incredible stuff, like the Coen brothers. There's another example where it's like, it blows my mind that The Big Lebowski was pretty much like every single line in that movie is pretty much as it was written. And you would think that was so much of that was ad-libbed, or it was actors taking, but the Coens are very specific about what but they're also, the quality of what they're doing is so incredible that I'm getting into the weeds here, but the quality of what they're doing is so incredible that in many ways as an actor, you take that and you can go, oh yeah, but I can just jump into that. Like you don't, there's so much happening for you to chew on and to work with that you don't necessarily need that kind of space, because the joy is within the thing itself, right? But again, the Coen brothers are a pretty rare breed, So anyhow, I've said a bunch of shit. I'm going to pass it back to you before I get into trouble.
Well, you did say a lot. I will say, so this reminds me a little bit of one conversation we had a little while ago about creating the conditions for art to flourish. Or I don't remember what we titled it. What was the name of that? Do you remember? Yeah. Anyway, so I do think that this is a big part of creative control exists in this realm of like, you want to create a container in which things can exist, or you want to create a sandbox or an area in which things can evolve from, and you give it some specific things so that people have something to kind of grip onto and work with, and and that helps, because if you just kind of if it's all improv, if it's all ad lib, or it's all just kind of jazz, right? Sometimes it can go off the rails. But you want to create room for that kind of play. And so, I think like when it comes to directors, like really like visionary directors, like the Tarantinos and Scorsese and Fincher and people who really like they have a very clear, specific vision in which they want to bring to life. I'm certain as much detail as they put into things, they don't know everything. They're not in control of every little thing. And, you work with people and they bring things to your attention. And as they bring things to your attention, you kind of, you go, oh, that's great. Let's look at that. Let's explore that. And so something I learned as a director is a great thing to do, for any director out there. If you're working with your director of photography, DOP, cinematographer, whatever you want to refer to them as, don't tell them how to do their job. Tell them the feeling that you want them to create for you. You'll get the best work out of people, because like if you tell them, I want you to put a light here, I want you to do that, you want to tell them like what I want it to feel is I want it to feel dark and gritty, and I want the light to be sharp, and I want it to feel like there's something looming in the background and you can't see it, but you kind of know it's there. Like that's the feeling I want to have with this scene. They're going to have a field day with that. They're going to love that, because that gives them a chance to create. And you don't know what they're going to come up with. And the other thing too is if they are really experts at their job, they're going to start to explore their own imagination. And that's what you want to implore into them. You have creative control in that you're sending them on a mission to do something for you, but you're not telling them how to go about their mission. And they're going to start to figure, okay, well, how do I create that? What am I going to do? How am I going to make that work? And if they really are the masters of that tech, they're going to accomplish that for you. And if they don't, you can kind of say, well, okay, well, you're close, but it needs to be a little more of this or a little more of that. You're working together at that point. Something I wanted to bring up was I was thinking about Training Day, and the director, Antoine Fuqua, right? That's it, Antoine Fuqua. Anyway, I heard him talking about directing Training Day and directing Denzel Washington in particular. And I was looking at, his work and the script, and there's a lot of ad lib by Denzel that just seems like so natural. It just fits and it's so perfect. And there's this story he shares of Denzel turns to him, like the camera's rolling and the scene's going, and Denzel turns to him and is like, "You're gonna call cut?" And he's just like, I'd get so enamored by Denzel's performance. It was just so alive that I just forgot to call cut. I'm just like, we're just rolling the camera. It's just happening. And I think that's like Denzel, I'm pretty sure he won an Oscar or something for that role, right? So that's a great role. It's an amazing story. Like structurally as a story, it's incredible. There's so many good, like the plot points and the sequences and the character development and everything is so great about that. The setup and then the delivery and the climax and everything is so wonderful structurally as a story. The thing is that all the right components are there. And then you find out how much Denzel like ad-libbed and how much he took a part in the creative process of developing that film. And it only enhanced what was already there. Because if you read the script, which I have, it's a great script just reading it. And you watch the movie, it's a great movie just reading it. And the thing is that creative control to me is like, it flourishes when you have certain key components worked out, but you leave room for play. And, for a director, I would say you have to have a vision, and then you cast your vision, you you share the feelings of it, you share the sense of it, because no one, like, if you start telling people like the camera needs to move over here and do this, sometimes that's going to be okay. But more often than not, that's you going to actually be taking away from, and you have creative control over that. You can start telling and dictating to people, hey, you have to do this and you have to do that. But if you give them something and you let them contribute, you bring it together. And there's this, I remember this Alan Watts talk, and at some point it's like, what would the universe look like if you could look at it? And the answer is a human being. And I always love that thought, because it's like when you bring two human beings together creatively, it's like you're bringing two universes together and they're trying to find a relationship. And if you let only one person dictate everything and the other, you lose out on an entire universe. And so if you work with people, and especially if you trust their universe, because you had previous experience and you trust that they're going to, they're not coming from a place of ego. They're not trying to like just, I don't know, pad their own thing. Like they're just trying to make themselves great, and they don't care about the project or the art or the song or the movie or the script or whatever. But you guys are really genuinely trying to come together and you're trying to make something great, and you both don't really know what it'll be until it's done. That's where it's like, that's where you have to let go of creative control. And I guess the last thing I want to say just on this whole thing is, when you are fighting for creative control, and I'm going to use that kind of fighting for it, because sometimes you have to make a point. You have to make an argument. Why do you think that your version of this is worth being the dominant one? And you and I, Evan, we used to write scripts, and we would have these moments where we would kind of try to work out dialogue in a scene or try and work out a moment, and we both kind of argue our point. And it was a great experience for me, because sometimes I really thought I was right, I had the way, I knew what we should do. And then you would bring a counterpoint to it, and you would say, something that pointed out something that maybe I hadn't thought about. And I'd be like, oh, okay. But if I wasn't open to that, we couldn't really evolve. Later on, like, I think I wrote some of my first major scripts with you. Later on, when I started to write on my own, I remembered our work together. And when I was writing on my own and I thought, oh, I know what's going on, I would kind of almost like take the position of having a supportive like writer that I'm co-writing with, and then come in and be like, yeah, but what do you think about this idea or whatever? And just kind of like go like, maybe you don't have the whole picture. And I found that this really enhanced the work. And I think the error that people make when they want creative control is that I know best, my way is the best way. And I think that's where it gets dangerous. I think if you have that, you have a kind of arrogance, and what you need is a certain amount of humility. On the other side, I'll say one other thing. If you have too much humility, you never trust yourself, you never think, hey, I have something valid, I have some way. Sometimes you need to just take a risk and just go, okay, I'm going to try this. Just see if it works. And if it doesn't work, then maybe you rework it. But I think you present your ideas wholeheartedly to someone. And if they shoot them down or change them or alter them, don't take it personally. Look at it as, oh, when I came into this conversation presenting this idea, I saw it this way. But now our universes have combined, and now I see something I didn't see before I shared my idea.
Yeah. Sorry. No, I had something that I was going to say this sort of somewhat prepared, but now it's gone. So I'll just jump into something else. So to come back to what your, before we started recording and the point that you were initially making, because I think that there's still a value. Like, it's not a zero-sum game situation here of it's like the whole thing between the individual and the collective. It's like that's one of the great yin and yangs of life, right? Like, and there's a relationship to those things, and it's a dance that happens there, and finding the harmony there, but it's not a one or the other kind of a scenario. And that's when things get too out of control, is when it tries to be too one or the other, right? Because if it gets too much by committee, then suddenly it's just like there's too many cooks in the kitchen, there's too many voices, the whole thing starts to, become a mess. The narrative is falling apart. There's too many ideas that are trying to be communicated all in one thing. They're not unified behind something. And by the same token, you have too much of just an individual's ego and control over things. Then it's like there can be just things that get overlooked. There's, plot holes. There's, maybe the person's vision isn't even that great or strong to begin with, right? There can be too many problems, and there's no allowance for the talents of other people to come through, right? Like you start undermining people's talents. It was really micromanaging. That was the thing that I was going to talk about. It's like, it's kind of like in so many things, it's like, just don't micromanage. That's one of those things where I think most people just agree. It's just like, oh, they're a freaking micromanager. They're just and it drives everybody absolutely crazy. And that the example that you were giving about, like as a director, when you can communicate to your team of people in a way that's like bring them into the vision, right, of things, right? You're not just saying like laying down the law, right? At least from the beginning stages, you're giving some space and trust to people to be like, okay, I'm trusting you. This is what I'm trying to achieve. This is what I'm trying to do. And getting people on board with that. It's like, yeah, I'm excited. I can see it. I'm with you. And like, let's do that thing. And then, you're giving the person that opportunity to then show you what they can do, because they can do it better than you can do it. I would hope so. Yeah. Right. That's why they are hired to do the thing that they're there to do. Right. It's like one of the things that I've always thought about with acting as well. Right. And writing characters and things, like, as it's so important that you communicate the essence of the character. Right? Like the essence needs to come through, but there's so much space that has to be left there for the actor, because hopefully the actor is going to go far deeper than you ever did in when you were writing it and putting this all together. There might be the rare few exceptions where it's like the one character is the story, and as like the writer director or whatever, like that's your key focus, is really actually having to dive into understanding everything that's going on with them, because how you film them, how you light them, how everything is based on that character, what's going on with them in the moment, all that. But those are very specific kinds of, because typically you got so many other things. You got the bigger vision that you're trying to bring all together. And so you have the actors, and you have to say like, okay, I'm trusting, and you have to communicate the things that are important to you about this character, right? Like, this is what I really want to make sure this comes through to the audience, right? And that's part of the fun and the collaboration. And maybe you're bringing something to it that the actor hadn't thought of. That's just like, oh, holy shit, you just unlocked a whole thing to this that I didn't even think of, right? Yeah. And I just got chills, like with that, just because like that's when the work can be so exciting, right? As opposed to just being, because when you're just, the last thing I'll say is that part of the thing that this is going to Alan Watts as well, but like one of the things that I remember from, whether it was a book or a lecture or whatever, but he was talking about how power and control, anyone who's really thought about it doesn't really want it. Because it's actually to live in a fearful state. because you have to just keep on top of everything all the time. It actually is asking you to do, you're asking yourself to do something that you're not actually capable of doing, which is to be able to control every single minutia of everything, especially within the realms of like something like a film production, right? It's like, it's just impossible, and you set yourself to an impossible task, and you're going to make yourself sick with anxiety and fear and worry and all of that shit trying to do it. And you're going to make everybody miserable in the process too. And there's a much more, there's a much smoother and more creative and richer way of doing it.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to add before I forget, I wanted to add one thing to it. You know, sometimes you bring people into the vision and tell them what you're trying to do, and sometimes it's best not to. Like, for example, if you're working as a director and you're working with an actor, it might be better not to tell them what you're trying to do, but to rather provoke them or give them the ingredients they need to bring out something that they're unaware of. So like, people can get in their heads creatively. So for example, it's like, you have an actor that is really like in that actor's world. So like, this is, you know, I think this comes with a little bit more experience, I suppose, but in that actor's world, you're aware that that actor, if they're really doing the role, it makes sense to them. Like they've somehow justified, and they might be playing a character that's like not a great character, but it might not be obvious to them that that character is not a great character. And so instead of being like, I want your character to be really hated by the audience and that's just going to get them in their head. That's not helping them. Now they're going to have to try to go like, oh, I want to be hated. You know, don't do that. That's not like, you're not really helping them achieve the goal. Encourage them to do more of what would make them like despicable, and help them justify it. So like, when this person did that to you, like, and they did this, and you know, how did that make you feel? And what would you really like to say to them? What would you really like to do to them? Okay, now as you say this line, I want you to like say that to them, but say it in these words that are written here. And then all of a sudden, you know, they're gritting through their teeth. They're like, yeah, I got you. You know, and it's just like, you're like, oh, what the fuck was that? You know what I mean? And it's just like they're saying something, but there's a subtext. And the thing is, you don't have to let everyone in on what you're trying to do creatively, but you always got to keep your ego in check. This is the most important thing I think that I've learned. And the thing that misled me the most in my younger years is my ego snuck in there, and I was trying to do something to like, to do something personal, to get something to like, pad my own kind of career or something. Right. And, I think that always ends up undercutting you. Well, I would say almost always. You probably get away with it every once in a while, and hopefully you never do. Because if you think you can get away with it, then you're in danger, because then you start thinking, hey, I can get away with this. I can do this. I can control this. That's really bad. It's bad for you. It's bad for everybody. I think, you know, what you want to really do is, I was actually, you know, I'll share this. I was talking with a business coach about this today, and we were talking about where competitiveness comes into certain things, and how a dynamic of competitiveness can be born accidentally, and how sometimes that can be good, but sometimes that can actually work against you. And the thing is when people think that they're competing with each other, it becomes a personal pursuit. And they start to think, well, I'm not going to help that person because that's my competition. And if I help them, then they're going to beat me, and I don't want them to beat me. And so if you create that dynamic, say on set in a movie or in a band or whatever, you're going to create people that they don't help each other. They're not trying to make each other flourish and be better. And you're going to kill synergy, and you're going to kill that thing that's better, like the whole that's better than its parts. What you want to do is especially if you're working with a group where everybody needs to come together to make it better, you want to enroll people in the idea that helping their fellow artists is going to help them do their job. Because what's going to happen is if everybody sees it as the better you do, the better I do, instead of people focusing on themselves and thinking, how do I do my job better? Because you can only do your job so well. Like, you know it, you do it the best you can. But if you believe and are enrolled in the idea that if you over there do your job better, I'll do my job better. And that really is the true, like that is the true form of a team. Teams that work symbiotically to better, like together, are better. I'll share one last story. I'm going to pass it over to you. But when I remember when I was playing soccer, and I had, I forget when this was in my career, but I remember playing with a bunch of really good players. And I remember coming off the field and a couple of parents were like, wow, you played great and everything. And I'm like, wow, I was just like, man, I played so well. And my friend's dad pointed this out to me. He's like, when you play with great players, you play better. And he wasn't saying this to me personally. He was saying this as like a matter of fact and he explained it to me. He said, it's because they know where to be. And when you pass the ball, they're open and you're not getting caught in a corner. Like he went into this whole like diatribe explaining. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense because all my passes were so great. And then my movement, everything was so easy and seamless. But all these guys I was playing with, they just knew where to be. They knew not to, they had their head up. They were playing the ball. They weren't just hanging on to the ball. They were, were moving and you weren't just standing still. And everybody was playing a part. And I was like, I walked off the field and I looked great and people commented on it, but I felt great. And it was like, truly, I'm the same player that played with other players. But the thing is that these other players made me better. They made me look like a star. And so I think when you're in any type of collaborative medium with art, you really want to think about how do I inspire the people around me to do better in their job? Because if they do better in their job, you're just going to have opportunities to do better in your job just naturally as a byproduct. So if you're working, and one last example, if you're working with a fellow actor in a scene, your performance is going to be largely based on their performance. So if you help them and you just focus on giving them and setting them up to succeed as much as possible and not trying to be combative with them or competitive with them over who's going to get more screen time and who's the real lead here and all that shit, but you're really setting them up to succeed, they're going to be in the position and they're going to do the things you need to do to really flourish. They're going to give you that thing that you need. And then you're actually going to look better. So if you focus on yourself, trying to give yourself and pad your own thing, you actually undermine your own thing. And you're nodding, Evan. I know you know this is true. Because this is like one of the backbones of Meisner acting as well, right? Moment to moment. But if every rich moment you get is, and if you're truly trusting it, you will give another rich moment.
Yeah, take the attention off of yourself is always kind of a great idea, right? Like creative control. Like and you brought in the word ego, which is like, yeah, I mean, isn't that kind of always the problem? That like, if maybe the problem on a grand scale, but at the very least within art and creativity and being a great artist, ego is always I think the great enemy of art, because it's the thing that brings in all the shit that doesn't matter into the equation, right? That keeps you from actually keeping the thing that's important in view, right? Like we're kind of in the realm of talking about acting and film and performance in that respect. So we'll just maybe sort of stick to that. But it's, if I'm an actor and I'm thinking about while I'm performing, the way that I'm standing or whatever, and how my body's positioned, and thinking about like, oh, okay, now how am I going to get to this, the next moment, or thinking about how I'm going to say the next lines while the other person's talking, instead of just taking the attention off of myself and really listening to them, that's kind of one of the first things that, when that clicks for an actor, it's a game changer, because it's like, oh, holy shit. In some ways, I don't have to do so much right? At least it feels that way because we're so used to trying to control everything, so used to trying to show all of our brilliance and ideas and blah, 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 blah. It's all nonsense. But what happens when you're actually really just listening to the other person and really having an interaction with them where it's like, I don't know how I know what the lines are. That's important, right? But I have no idea how the words are going to come out because as Alan Rickman in a great interview said, he's like, what I say is completely incidental to what you're doing. Like it's completely dependent upon whatever's happening with you over there, right? And then that shapes what's going on with me. And now I'm actually really grounded and present. And as an audience, I go, it's like, oh, holy shit, they're really having a conversation right now. That's interesting. It's not just two actors acting at each other. It's like, oh, they're really having a conversation. And if the other person is in the same boat, right? And they go, it's like, oh, holy shit. Now they just gave me a whole bunch of shit that I wasn't necessarily expecting. And it's all because they're just reacting off of wherever you are. And then it just like, you just sort of spin out together. And that's magic. That's absolute magic. And hopefully that gets captured and bottled up and, and that shit goes out to the people. Right. But that's part of how that flow goes. But I do want to make a bit of a case here for the initial thing, which was sort of the last time I spoke, I was trying to get to there and I got lost, but making the case for that individual thing, for the individual thing, because that is another side. And we've been spending a lot of time talking about the power and the richness and beauty and all those things that come through the collective, that come through the collaboration and in taking the sort of the taking in from others. But we need to make, I think, the case for, okay, but where, like the question of what would you do, right? That is an important one, right? Like, what is the story that you would tell? What is the thing of like, that question that often gets asked of like, if money were no object, like what would you do? Sort of, and to say just as like a thought experiment, if you had every resource, if you had every, thing to make whatever, your thing is, right? Whatever your creative thing is, and you could just do it, what would it be? What is the story that you would tell? What is the music that you would make? What would that be? What would be the dream, right? Because there's something very meaningful and powerful about being connected to that thing as well, right? And again, it's not because it's not in what am I saying? Like, it's not a zero-sum game in that it's like, it's an exclusion of the group, of the collective. Because when you really get to the heart of it, you actually are talking to the group. That's why it's like the beauty. I love the symbol of the yin and the yang. It's like there's so much wisdom that's contained in that symbol. I used to think it was just kind of a funny symbol growing up, but as I've gotten older, I was like, holy shit, there's so much wisdom. Because part of it is that in the heart of each one is the other. It's not just kind of randomly located. In the very heart of it is its opposite. Right? That's an interesting thing to like think of when you look at any sort of duality. But in the heart of the individual is the collective. And so when you tap into something that feels so deeply personal, so deep in the heart, it's like you're actually saying something, you're actually potentially saying something so profound for all of us, right? And you're saying it in a way that is uniquely yours, right? When you follow it and you adhere to it, right? And that's the travesty is when we get discouraged from doing that, when we don't have faith or confidence in telling that story, right? Because that is a travesty as well. When someone just doesn't have the courage to say that thing that is sometimes actually a little bit scary to say. That's kind of, I think, why it often happens. Why we sort of water those things down is because it can be scary. It can be very vulnerable when you start to get to the heart of something that's really meaningful and important to you. And I think that that's where, in many ways, that's where you fight to maintain your control, to keep your vision, is the things that are like, no, this is the thing that is the most meaningful to me. And once you start to know what that is, and that can be on a very big scale, it can be on, hey, it's just for this, like for this project, this is the thing that this is about for me, right? And it's not just some intellectual idea. There's something much more going on to it than that. And that becomes a little bit of a guidance system for you when you stay, and why it's important to stay connected to it. Because while all the stuff is going on and things are happening and being put together and other people are getting involved, is that you have that place. And then suddenly when someone's coming in, and they have their thing to say on this, and you can go, here's why I'm doing it this way, or here's why we're doing it this way. And it's because this, right? And you bring people in, and it's like, and if it really means, like, if it's the thing that launched the ship, who's going to argue with it? Like that in so many ways. And you're talking about, how like the scripts that we wrote together, and very often, I'm sure, like, I can't think of specific examples, but it's whether who sort of, because I don't even see it as an argument, right? It wasn't even an argument, but it's like whose ever sort of idea was the one that we went with. It was because it was whichever one of us was connected to the most meaning for that thing. I'm almost positive if we were able to like retrace it, it's like, yeah, no, you're better tied to the meaning of what was going on here than I was. And you could communicate that to me, or I could communicate it to you and go, oh, holy shit. Yeah, okay, I can't argue with that, right? Like that's because the thing that's the true thing to do is often pretty apparent, when it's connected and when it's communicated.
Well, I love that you brought in the other side of this argument, and you naturally did it right at the halfway mark, whether you're intending it or not, I think was great. So it's nice to take a chance now to focus on that. Yeah, the collective is obviously a very important part. I'm actually glad that we did it this way, where we started with kind of really arguing for the collective before we got into the more of the individual vision, expression, even, I don't want to use this word, but I'm going to just control. Something that this is what I've been chewing on, is that I've been realizing, like, so I've been in the film industry for 25 years, and over the last 10 years, I would say I've gone through the most dramatic change in the sense of like what I value, what matters to me, why I'm even a part of this anymore, why I want to do any of this stuff. A lot of whys, a lot of purpose, a lot of deep soul searching, heart to heart moments. And there's an old version of me and there's a new version of me. And there's this version of me that I sometimes default back into where I go, oh, well, when I was, this is why I started this, or this is why, I did that. And it's a very interesting thing, because the initial thing that gets you started in something, just because it was the first thing doesn't mean it's the truth. It doesn't mean it's your thing. Like the novel that I'm working on right now, it all started, and I remember because I wrote this all out, it all started about a man and a woman who were married and had a kid, a little kid. They had a kid together, and he was an undercover cop, and it was about the struggle of their relationship. That was the inspiration behind the whole idea. And I know that I turned a corner at a certain point, because like this story has this story has been on a journey with me, because it's like, it started out as actually, remember that project, The Burning Blues, that I wrote back in the day? So that project like has been one of those ones where it's like just sitting there in my like psyche being like, write me, like we have life, like give me breath of life, and eventually it became this novel, and the novel's so much different than the initial thing. But at a certain point I recognized that the story with the wife and the husband and their kind of like distant relationship, it wasn't really relevant to the story anymore. It wasn't really what this was about. But something in that still carried through. And once I detached from the initial thing, like I'm trying to hang on to the seed that kind of started the plant, thinking I know what that seed is, and recognizing that it wasn't really about that. What I was trying to do was I was trying to tell a story about like love and relationship, and how the demands of like work and just passion and mission and things like that, and how these things sometimes they come in conflict with each other, and how they're really about the same thing, but neither party can see how they're really about the same thing. And I knew that I hit on the truth again and the initial seed when I realized that my main character believes in his heart that he is protecting and saving and loving his family by doing the thing that he's doing in the world, because he believes that that's what's going to do the best to keep them safe, protect them, love them, and care for them. And really by the end of this novel, I hope that the audience sees that, or at least that argument could be argued, because that really is the truth, because it is the truth of the story. But it's in this technocracy and all this crazy shit is happening, and it's a detective story, and there's, car chases and gunfights and all sorts of cool shit that's going on. But all of that is just dressing. It's all just fancy stuff. And so I think that if anybody, like if this novel ever got turned into a movie or a TV show, I think I can make a great argument to anybody and say like, listen, this is where that story was born from. This is where it evolved to. And this is what I surmise that this is really what it was all about all along. And I've worked on this story, like I've put so much effort into it now, and it just seeps through every pore of it. Like it's just so much about people who don't see it the same way, but it's all about that love. And when it all comes back down to that, and I think that anybody who, like, if this did ever get turned into a movie and any actor got to play any of these roles, they would probably just be like, man, you gave me so much to chew on. Because really every character at the end of the day is somehow tethered to this seed. And that seed, no matter how much the story has changed, that seed is somehow always still true. It's just that my understanding of that seed has evolved. And I think that it's very, very important that I keep true to that no matter what happens. And I did learn, like earlier on in my film career, like at one point I was working with, I think the count was 123 people. There might have even been more, but I knew we had 123 people on this production. I just remember that because it's 1, 2, 3. But it had the departments. I had all these actors. I had people who were helping me in like every area. And there was a certain point where I remember I started to get pulled away from the initial vision of the idea. And I've thought a lot about that. And I kind of, after that happened, I was like, I'll never let that happen again. The problem is when you get that many universes coming together, that many people contributing, and granted, not all 123 people were really creatively contributing, but you get enough minds, enough cooks in the kitchen kind of trying to bring this thing to life and having their own versions and interpretations of it. People need you to come back and say, listen, this is what this is about. And one of the things about that show, which was really important, and I wish I communicated it more and stayed true to it more, was at the end of the day, part of the reason why we were even making that show was because it was two best friends who wanted to bring something to life that they had as kids. And it was like, we wanted to bring our wildest dreams to life and show everybody that it could be done, and we wanted to be a part of it. And that was a key essence of that whole production. And at a certain point, it became about, hey, could this be a big show? Could this make people's careers? And that's where it started to go off the fucking rails. Because yes, it could, but it wasn't about that. It was never about that. It was about just neighborhood kids getting together, making a movie. That's what it was about. And I realized that the team started to have splits once that vision started to get detached from, and it started to become more about the fame and the fortune. What could this be, and where could this go, and how could this help everyone's career? And, you know, I mean, I had to learn it my own way, but I would say like, that's a good example of where, you know what, it isn't about the collective anymore. I get everybody wants to be famous. I get everybody seeing this as a cash cow now. I get that everybody thinks, hey, this is my fucking meal ticket. And that's when we need to bring it back and say, hey, at the end of the day, this is about a bunch of neighborhood kids making a movie. This isn't about us being famous. This isn't about money. This isn't about the buzz. It isn't about any of that shit. And that's not even a story. That's just about, why are we even making this fucking thing, you know? And when it started to become about the ego and the fame and the fortune and the buzz and all that shit, that's when everybody started to kind of split, because that's when everyone's ego started to become more important than the initial point. And I think this is where the collective sometimes gets in the way, where it becomes about, oh, I have this thought and I have this thought and everybody's equal. No, everybody isn't equal. If you create something, if you are the initiator of the idea, unless you die and have to hand it off, you need to speak up about that, because that is always and forever relevant. And you might not have the words, and you might not articulate it the right way, and you might not be able to express yourself. And I think it's okay to say that. I think it's okay to say, listen, I don't even know how to express this, but let me at least tell you this. How I came up with this riff on the guitar was, my girlfriend just broke up with me and I was feeling super sad, and then I started strumming this tone, and that's where this came from. So let's not lose that as we start to try to figure out what other instruments and what other vocals are going to be put into this thing, you know? You can use any art medium, but I think the key thing is, I think as artists, we need to be really in touch. What was that value? What was that voice or that vision or something in there? And it's not complete, it's the seed. But I think it's very important that we recognize that if that seed started it, it's probably still there. It might not be described the same way, but it's somehow still relevant in whatever you're doing next.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I almost hesitate to use the word, but screw it. It's like, what's the pure thing? You know, like there's something, hopefully at the beginning of any creative endeavor, there's the thing that you're going off of, there's something very pure about it, you know, very pure and innocent about it. And that's the thing that you have to kind of protect, you know, in a kind of way. And yeah, like you were saying, it can be so easy for it to start becoming about other things, right? And next thing you know, the pure thing has just been kind of stuck in the corner, right? It's been shoved off to the side. Nobody even remembers what the whole thing is about anymore. And yeah, it can really be a poison once the focus starts to become to be about, what will this do for me? What can this do? Like, how big can this become? It's like, and this is honestly, like, I think we have on some level an intuition about how hazardous that is, you know, going about things with that being the primary focus. But I think that we're starting to learn. I think we're really like, it was like, yeah, we know. But then when it comes down to it, we're still kind of going after it, right? We're still all kind of just want that shit, right? We want sort of greatness without actually doing anything great. And we really need to I think that we are coming to this point where we're actually really starting to understand it, that it's just like, oh yeah, holy shit, that whole thing is a complete trap. And that the creation of something truly beautiful, amazing is through that kind of like selflessness, in the sense of what you're doing is in service to the pure thing. It is in service to the pure creative seed and nothing else. And really extraordinary things come out of that. And the thing is that there have been artists throughout time who were never recognized, who only years later, like after they've long been dead, people go, it's like, holy shit, this stuff was amazing. Yeah. And that's something that it can sound in some ways, yeah, that's disheartening. It can be disheartening to think about it that way. But we have to start thinking about it in the other way of just being like, well, no, it doesn't, all of that stuff doesn't matter. What matters is truly doing the great work. And how do we actually do that? Because it's not when your choices and decisions and actions are in service to egotistical wants, desires, fame, fortune, all this stuff. And look, we all got to make a little bit of money. I'm not trying to be, I don't want anyone to think that I'm being really overly naive about this, but I'm speaking specifically to, if you truly desire to be great as an artist, really the great battle that you are in is all of those fucking things. Poisoning and watering down and just contaminating the pure thing. Like that is the thing that's going to get in the way. It's going to make you start making little fucking stupid decisions and things. It's like, oh, I wouldn't do it that way. Right. And not in a way it's like somebody's actually given a better thing that's actually going to better realize the thing for you, but because you're doing it out of some sense of fear or because, oh, well, this worked for something else, even though it's not what you actually want to do or desire to do, or the thing that is the right thing to do, right? Like just whatever causes those kinds of compromises, right? And they're all the bullshit ones. So it's really what is the thing that is the most important for you when it comes down to creating, right? Like what is the thing that is, and being honest about it, like being really honest about it, because, I really hope that I'm speaking to people who want to be truly great artists, right? And that is something that you have to have your awareness open for it all the time, right? And it's like a continual thing. I don't think it's a thing that goes away, because there's always this push and pull. There's always this sort of things that are trying to influence, whether it's literally someone in there or someone's voice that's in your head. That was something we were talking about before, but like, these things that we carry around with us that cause us to, or push us towards compromising the things that are actually the important things, that are actually the things that you need to be uncompromising on, right? So I don't know, that's what I got. Should we talk beer, or do you want to say something else to that?
Yeah, well, we'll talk beer. I guess, you brought up one other thing about compromise, and I feel like that's an element of this whole thing, is like, where do I compromise, and where do I hold strong and hold steady? And I think that it's really good for people to ask why. Why do I care? Why does this matter? Try to find purpose in things. Why do I want to do this? And be really honest with yourself, because if you're like, what do you like going for? What are you fighting for? And, one other thing I would say about just about the collective thing, it's like trust is earned. There's a certain amount of trust in which people will grant you, and not everybody grants you the same amount of trust. But most of the trust you ever get from any other person is generally earned, and it can be destroyed very quickly. So, I think speaking to the artists out there who, if there's something that you're trying to do in your life, and you don't think that everybody has some kind of special knowledge or something that you don't. Don't think that because you're young that somehow someone older knows more than you. That's not true. I can say one thing. If I'd say one thing to my younger self, I would say, listen, just because it looks like these people know what they're talking about does not mean they know what they're talking about. Don't assume that just because they're older and they have experience or they have more life on you, that somehow they have more access to the truth than you do. If you have something in your heart, or if you have a vision, or you have a calling, or you have a seed that's blossoming, and trust that, own that, live by it, and you can make your compromises around how that thing will come out, but don't let someone take that away from you, tarnish it, or tell you that it's somehow not enough, not good enough, not valid, not any of this shit. I think one of the things that I struggled with a lot, because I struggled a lot with not being good enough throughout my life, was that I constantly assumed that people knew something I didn't, had something I didn't, and that I just, there was a point, I compromised myself too much. And then there was a point where I just became outright defiant, and I said, well, fuck you to everybody else, and I'm just going to do it my way. And there's a problem with doing it that way too, but that was me trying to fight for my kind of seed of vision and whatever, which I think is okay. Whatever you're doing, it's okay. I would also tell myself, the way you're being perfectly makes sense, because that makes sense to you. There's nothing wrong with it. There's in some ways, the way you're doing it is the truth. And I would just say to those artists who are fighting for that vision and that individuality, that expression that they're trying to share and connect and get the collective to get on board with and get enrolled in, just fucking be passionate about it. Just be like, why do I care about this? And tell people why you care about it and why it matters to you. And people will get behind you. I know, because I'm living proof. I've become somebody who, when I tell people this is what matters to me, people go, cool, all right, let's fucking do that. People don't really fight me on it, because when they see that I'm lit up about it and it means something to me, they often come and help me with it. But my early year experiences, my youth, it was very no, that's not good enough. That's not a valid way to live your life. What are you really going to do? All that type of shit. So I felt very combative, and I felt like I was on the defense. But once I started finding the right people around me who were supportive and encouraging and wanted to help me do stuff, they wanted me to share my vision. They got excited about it, and I could see their eyes light up. I could see it inspire them. And then they would help me do great things. And so I would say that, the collective needs your individual voice. It needs your vision. It needs you to share your calling with them. All these people who are collecting, and if you are the core seed behind it, they're collecting because they believe in that seed. They might not even know what the seed is, but something about it somehow aligned with them, and they're there with you. And now they're there with you. Share it with them. Be bold and courageous enough to say, hey, this is why I'm doing this. Do you want to help me do it? And anybody who's there to help you do it, you can begin to trust their collective input. And anybody who's there just to use you for it, or get something out of you, or exploit you for it, just fucking cut them loose. And don't worry about it, and just be like, look, we don't align. This would be my best statement for any young filmmaker. I would say if you run into somebody that you find is using you, manipulating you, trying to get something out of you, just stop them and say, listen, we need a private meeting. Have a private meeting with them and say, listen, we don't align. Here's why I don't think we align. Let's just part ways now. And they might be upset, whatever. Just always just go back to that thing. Alignment, alignment, alignment. Because the whole collective needs someone to align them. And when someone comes in and disrupts that, it doesn't only hurt you, it hurts everybody else. But yeah, at the same time, understand that your seed, as much as you might feel like, hey, I know it, this is what I'm doing, if you get the right people around you, you won't want to have creative control over everything. You'll start to let it go and you'll feel safe to let it go. And I think that's a big part of this conversation, is that if you don't feel safe to let go of creative control, it could be that you're not surrounded by people who you trust and do feel safe with, but it also might be that you need to look at something in yourself where you're hanging on too tightly and you just need to loosen your grip. But that's up to you to figure out. And that's a master artist's skill. And you're going to do it wrong, but you'll get a little bit more right every time you figure it out a little bit more in every creative endeavor you take on. So that's what I have to say. But beer, let's do beer. So this was this was definitely an interesting one on our first sips. I know that for sure. This is a pear Kolsch. And it's from Foamer's Folly Brewing, right? That's how you say it? Yeah, Foamer's Folly. Foamer's Folly Brewing. It's grown on me actually over the podcast. I've enjoyed it more and more. And I think it was like about 3 to 5 sips in. I'm like, I think I like this now. But my first, I was like, I don't know. I might have so this is an interesting beer. I would just say anybody who has it, just give it a chance. Give it a chance. That first sip, it is a little interesting. I'm not sure that I loved my entry into this beer, but as I've been sipping on it, I've been finding that I enjoy it. So that's been kind of my experience with it. I don't know. How about you?
Yeah, I had kind of a similar experience with the first sip being like, oh, I don't know about this. But as it went on, it's been good. But it's never been amazing for me at this thing. Because to me, when I go with a Kolsch, I think really clean, crisp, kind of dry finish and all that sort of stuff. This doesn't have a lot of those qualities. It's light, but it kind of, I don't know, kind of lingers in a way that I'm not totally crazy about, but it's not bad. It's not bad, but I don't know if I would go for this one again, but definitely better than what the first sip kind of indicated that it might be. But I find that that's often, I always tell people, it's you have to have 2 sips. You have to have at least 2 sips with any sort of drink, because the first one is just kind of priming the taste buds for everything, and then the second one gives you a bit of a sense of whether you actually like it. So it's good.
Yeah,
it's good.
I agree.
I'll give it a good. All right. So creative control. I enjoyed this chat. I enjoyed getting into this whole idea of, which I'm sure we've touched on in the past in little ways, but talking about it more directly has been fun. It's been enjoyable, and just exploring that relationship, because it is a relationship. It's not a one or the other kind of thing about, the individual having all the control or giving it all up. It's there's a harmony, there's a balance, and for in certain situations, it leans a little bit more in one direction or the other, and necessarily so, right? It's one of these things about this podcast. If you come here just looking for, just hard, straight answers on things, this is not the podcast for you, because that's just not how life is. It's not how creativity works. It's just not how that shit flies. It's a real thing that demands presence, attention, care. These are words that we use a lot on this show, right? Because they are in so many ways best tools that you have and the best things you need to learn and to grow with and evolve with, right? Is that learning how to respond, and in so many ways, I think that this podcast and this episode has been a lot about those things, even though we haven't necessarily talked about those things, because knowing when to let others speak up, knowing when you need to speak up, right? In many ways, that if you want to overly simplify a lot of this conversation, you could maybe put it in those terms, right? When to speak up and when to not, when to give others the floor. There's no sort of things like, okay, day 1, I do the speaking. Day 2, I let, it's like creativity is flowing and it's going in all kinds of directions. You got to be with the current, you got to be with the flow and learn and to recognize the moments. Just like, okay, handing it off to you right now. Oh, you know what? I'm going to just shut up and you take it away. Right? Or, you know what? Things are coming off the rails. I need to rally the troops. I need to rally everybody and I just get everybody focused onto the same goal, the same vision again. Hey, this is what it's about, people. Let's remember about that. Let's get back on the excited train that we seem to be losing sight of, right? That's such a dynamic thing. And a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people don't like that that's the situation, because in so many ways, it's simpler and easier to just have some sort of a stupid 1, 2, 3 step plan. And it's like, well, I mean, try it. But again, it's just not the way that shit works, right? And actually, when you do start to learn how to listen and how to pay attention and do these things and build them into just the way that you are and the way that you can, it starts to actually become very simple, right? As you start to learn how to just trust yourself to be able to respond, right? Like it's really when I think a lot of the magic starts to happen, because it's just like stuff, like amazing things are just going on and it can feel like you're barely doing much at all. And yet it's like you're just moving mountains, right? It's just like, whoa, holy shit. How did that just go in that direction, right? And that's through just learning just these very simple things that many people have been talking about since the beginning of, recorded humanity as ways of being and living and all of those things. It's all the same with being a creative and being an artist. So creative control.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do feel like, in some ways, before we shared the beer, I feel like I summed up a lot of what I probably would have said at the end. I kind of just found myself in it, so I just finished the thought. But, yeah, I suppose I would say that, you don't have to be perfect at things and you don't have to always have the right answer. I feel like that's a really important thing. I really liked what you said. If you've tuned into this podcast and you're looking for hard answers, you're in the wrong place. Because, and it was not even about like anybody who's giving you hard answers on something, it's kind of just telling you their opinion a lot of the time. I mean, there are certain things where there's a hard, like right or wrong, like this is the way to do it and this isn't the way to do it. Like there are cases where that's so, but when it comes to something like art, it's based on so many different elements. Like what's your relationship with that person? What's the dynamic? What's your position? Have you earned your ability to speak up right now, or have you tarnished it by not keeping your word? I mean, this is something I always tell all of my students, show up on time. In fact, don't just show up on time, show up early, always, never be late. Like if you are late, like don't give some bullshit excuse like traffic or whatever. Like yeah, there was traffic, but you know what I realized? I realized that I didn't make this meeting important enough. And it is important to me. And traffic surprised me, but I want to apologize because I didn't make it important enough. That's a real fucking ownership of being late for a meeting. Not, oh, traffic got in the way. No, the real thing is that you didn't expect traffic, but you didn't make it important enough to be there on time. And if you fucking live like that, people respect you and they fucking go, holy shit, like I can count on this person. And you might look bad, but you might even feel bad. But the thing is that will earn things. And one thing that I really try to do with people is I really try to earn my way with them so that when I need to say something meaningful, I can. And they're going to want to listen because they know that I'm in integrity and they know that I'm really truthfully being honest and fair with them. So if you want to be somebody, if you want to be a visionary, if you want to be somebody who has creative control, fucking earn it. And like a lot of people look at leadership. I guess this is the last thought I would really want to leave people with, because I feel like creative control and leadership have a lot to do with one another. And I would say if you want to be a leader and you want to have creative control, you got to earn it. And to earn it means not standing up on the podium, collecting the award and getting all the praise and everybody saying, oh, that's the guy that did it. That's the one that did it. It's the person that takes it on the fucking chin when shit gets bad and saying like, when something goes wrong and you say, I'll take it. That was me. I did it. I'll give an example of this. I started doing a serving job, getting out there in the community, and it's been enjoyable. I've never been a server before, and I've been doing it for like a couple months here and trying it out. And I really like it. I love it. It's a great way to like, it's so interesting because I'm just like, wow, I can't believe I never did this. I've been an artist my whole life. But I made a mistake the other night. I've been pretty good, but I made an error where I ordered a dish I ordered two of them when there was only one, and it was kind of confusing because a lot of people ordered the same dish, and I just ordered one extra. Anyway, at the end of the night, it turned out that dish was ordered, and my manager was like, the owner was just like, oh, okay, well, we have this extra dish. And I'm like, I'm going to buy that. And they're like, you don't have to. I'm like, no, I'm going to buy it because I made that mistake. And I could see that I don't even know if she charged me for it. Like, I think she just didn't, because I looked at the end of the day and I'm like, I think that she didn't even charge me for it, but I was willing to pay for it. And I was like, I made that mistake. That was me. I'm going to pay for this. And like, yeah, I worked here, but I'm not, there's no free lunch. Like, I'm not taking that. I'm going to own my mistake. And I know that earns me a certain amount of trust and respect, is that if I make a mistake, I'm going to eat that mistake. I'm not going to cast it on someone else. I'm not going to blame someone else. I'm not, even if it truly was someone else's mistake, you know what I mean? Because the thing is that what that buys you, what that creates for you is something else entirely. And so as artists and creatives, I guess I would implore you to really look at how you can pick up the slack for your team. If you're going to create anything with anybody, especially if you want to be a leader and a visionary and somebody who has creative control, be the one that picks up the slack, and people will give you the grace. Like, they will give you the grace of creative control because they'll know that you're the kind of person that really like steps up when it matters. And I've always found that in sports to be true. I've always found that in projects, because they always say in like making a movie, you need a champion. Every movie, every show, everything that ever gets made needs a champion. So be that champion. And the champion is the one that takes it and doesn't like, and here's the other thing. This happened just happened this week. The night that happened, I was like, oh man, I'm losing money here. Like, and this is kind of a waste of my time. But the next night I got tipped so well on everything. Like, almost like the universe was just like, God was just like, hey, you did this. I'm just going to give it right back to you. And I feel like that's one of those things, is like when you go out there and you think, hey, like I'm going to live in abundance, the world somehow just gives you abundance back. So don't be scared to like be humble and look at it as earned. If you want creative control, it's got to be earned. And when you earn it, you can lose it quickly. So don't abuse it.
Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.